Tremendous environmental damage after Hurricane Ike. Hurricane Ike's winds and massive waves destroyed oil platforms, tossed storage tanks, and punctured pipelines. And the environmental damage only now is starting to become apparent. At least 500,000 gallons or more of crude oil spilled into the Gulf of Mexico and the marshes, bayous, and bays of Louisiana and Texas, according to a report of federal data. In the days before and after the deadly storm, companies and residents reported at least 448 releases of oil, gasoline, and dozens of other substances into the air and water and onto the ground in Louisiana and Texas. The hardest hit places were industrial centers near Houston and Port Arthur, Texas, as well as oil production facilities and platforms off Louisiana's coast. We are dealing with a multitude of many different types of pollution here, everything from diesel in the water to gasoline to things like household chemicals, said Larry Chambers with the U.S. Coast Guard Command Center in Pasadena, Texas. The Coast Guard, with the EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, and other state agencies, has responded to more than 3,000 pollution reports associated with the storm and its surge along the upper Texas coast. Most callers complain about abandoned propane tanks, paint cans, and all kinds of other hazardous materials turning up in marshes, backyards, and other places. Nearly 1,500 sites still need to be cleaned up. The Coast Guard's National Response Center in Washington collects information on oil spills and chemical and biological releases and passes it to agencies working on the ground. With the storm approaching, refineries and chemical plants shut down as a precaution, burning off hundreds of thousands of pounds of organic compounds and toxic chemicals. In other cases, power failures sent chemicals such as ammonia directly into the atmosphere. Such accidental releases most likely will not result in any penalties by regulators because the releases are being blamed on the storm. In other words, nobody's responsible. Texas Governor Rick Perry has also suspended all rules and regulations, including environmental ones, that would inhibit or prevent companies preparing for or responding to Hurricane Ike. So yes, in other words, no rules, no regulations. Power outages also caused sewage pipes to stop flowing, and the storm's surge dredged up smelly and oxygen-deprived marsh mud, which killed multitudes of fish and caused residents to complain of nausea and headaches from the odor. State and federal officials have collected thousands of abandoned drums, paint cans, and other containers, and there's many more to find. One caller reported a sheen from an underwater pipeline and said the substance was spewing from the pipe. The report found that by far the most common contaminant left in Hurricane Ike's wake was crude oil, the lifeblood and main industry of both Texas and Louisiana. Enough crude oil was spilled in just 1 week, nearly to fill an Olympic-sized swimming pool, and much more could still be released, officials said. as platforms and pipelines were turned back on. The Minerals Management Service, which oversees oil production in federal waters offshore, said the storm destroyed at least 52 oil platforms of roughly 3,800 in the Gulf of Mexico. At least 32 more were severely damaged. Air contaminants were the second most common release, mostly from the chemical plants and refineries along the coast. About half the crude oil was reported spilled at a facility operated by St. Mary Land and Exploration Company on Goat Island, Texas. The surge from the storm flooded the plant, leveling its dirt containment wall and snapping off the pipes connecting its 8 storage tanks, which held the oil and water produced from 2 wells in Galveston Bay. And by the time the company had reached the wreckage by boat, more than 24 hours after Hurricane Ike's landfall, the tanks were empty. Only a small spattering of the roughly 266,000 gallons of oil spilled was left, and that is already cleaned up, according to the company's regional manager. But the rest just vanished, likely into the Gulf of Mexico. Hurricane Ike's fury might have helped prevent worse environmental damage. Its rough water, heavy rains, and wind helped disperse pollution somewhat. The storm zapped many of the state's permanent air pollution monitors in the region. We came out of this a lot better than we could have been, especially thinking where the storm hit, said Kelly Cook, the Homeland Security Coordinator for the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality. Hurricane Katrina ranked as among the worst environmental disasters in U.S. history, with approximately 9 million gallons of oil spilled. But Ike's storm surge was less severe than feared, 12 feet rather than 20 feet plus, and the dikes, levees, and bulkheads built around the region's heavy industry mostly held, although some of it didn't. Hurricane Ike's toll on wildlife is still unfolding. The storm upended nature. Winds blew more than 1,000 baby squirrels from their nests. The storm surge pushed salt water into freshwater marshes and bayous, killing grasses where cattle graze and displacing multitudes of alligators and snakes. Flooding also stranded many cows. It's going to cause wildlife to suffer for a while. Yes, a lot of oil was spilled. A lot of pipelines were punctured. A lot of damage was done. Of course, it could have been much worse. Yes, it could have been much worse. And this is a man-made disaster too, on many levels, numerous levels. Because, well, I'm sure it's about money. But they could make more things more hurricane-proof, safer. That's about money too. How much environmental damage was really done? Well, we're going to be finding out for many months, if not years. Yes, a lot of oil was spilled into the Gulf of Mexico. A lot of contaminants into the atmosphere, like we really needed more contaminants in the atmosphere, which will only add to everything else, the greater total. And this hurricane and all these disasters, there's more to this story. It's about a much bigger picture. The times. These be the times, or these be the signs that something's not right with this world. It's time for change. And change is coming in a very, very big way. Bigger than a lot of people realize. Change has to come. It's a matter of survival for the entire earth and all of humanity. And it's about the future generations too. And these are more signs, end times, transition days. And there are many. signs.